thank you all for joining us for this Keep Kardia conversation. Kardia, the Greek word for heart, really embodies what we want to encourage in you and those that are listening. And today I am joined by two of our, my partner, Tim Holler, Dr. Tim Holler, who co-founded Kardia with me back in 2014, and Jason Holtgrewe, one of our licensed counselors here at Kardia. And so today's conversation is going to really be around this idea of loneliness and isolation, which is probably not a new topic for us. It's probably not a new topic for you, but I don't know if it's a topic that we've really understood what to do about it. And recently, the Surgeon General of the United States did a study and an advisory and research that they've been doing really since 2003 about what they're calling an epidemic of loneliness, which preceded the pandemic of COVID. And what they're saying and what that research is revealing is something that all of us need to be paying attention to. One, I don't know that loneliness is something that we've fully understood to the degree that to the degree that we know what to do about it, or even how to describe it. But I also don't think we've paid attention to the physical consequences of loneliness and what that actually does to our overall physiology and well-being. And in fact, in this research that the Surgeon General conducted, what they're saying is that the physical health consequences of poor or insufficient connection to other people includes a 29% increased risk of heart disease, a 32% increased risk of stroke, a 50% increased risk of developing dementia for older adults. Additionally, lacking social connection increases risk of premature death by more than 60%. That is almost impossible, or at least hard to believe, that what we're talking about is life and death. Like, we're not exaggerating that to say that your ability to connect with other human beings at a meaningful level, these interpersonal relationships, has an impact on the quality and length of your days. That is significant. So that's part of what we want to bring forward in this conversation. So Jason and Tim, thank you all for being with us. I'm glad that we have some expertise around that can help us resolve this today once and for all. So that's what y'all committed to doing when you joined this call. So anyway,
resolve it, huh?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Okay. We're looking to you for answers. So if you don't mind, just sum this up for us. But so you guys in this field where you guys are working with individuals on the daily, what are you seeing? How are you seeing this play itself out in the lives of your clients? And post-COVID now, or 18 months or so beyond, that influence. How are you guys seeing this play itself out?
Yeah, it's I'll start if you don't mind, Jason. You interrupt me if you want to add anything to this. But I want to say first that I'm very interested, always have been, in personality styles, personality types, and so they're very all of us vary in our degree of need for numbers of people involved in our lives. This numbers of people to connect with. For everybody's familiar with the terms extroversion and introversion, and so everybody has a different degree of like how many people necessarily. But there's nobody. Well, I shouldn't say that. The very few people, if any, have. I will say it. Nobody needs nobody. And in fact, if anybody needs nobody, there's a category for that, and it's in the DSM-5 as a disorder. So the whole of the Western world recognizes that if you actually need nobody, then there's something wrong. It's identified as pathological. So we all need somebody, but we don't all need the same degree of connection. But And so I want to point that out. We're not trying to imply that everybody needs to be with somebody or with 5 or 10 people every night or every other night or anything, but we do need connection. We are social creatures. We were made social creatures. And that means that there has to be someone or someones in our lives who see us, know us, accept us for who we are. And this space right here, the three of us, probably represents somewhere everybody on that continuum, or at least 3 different places on that continuum. Shad, I've known you for years. Like, you've got lots and lots of connections. I'm way at the other end, and I'm fine with 1 or 2. I'm not exactly sure where you are, Jason, but you're probably somewhere in the middle. And I just want to.
So everybody doesn't have to become extroverted in order to avoid being lonely.
That's right. Absolutely. Say that first.
Which should be a relief. And I do like nobody needs nobody. That's a good bumper sticker. So this isn't about really the quantity of relationships or connections, which is also kind of the paradox here, because we're in a more connected age than ever, and yet still feeling less connected than ever. And so that's the reality of the quality of the relationships and the connections.
Shad, you're saying that you can be an extrovert and still be lonely?
That's definitely true. Yes. Witness.
How's that? Yeah. Tell me about that. What's that like?
Yeah. It's I think you're messing with me, but I think it's a really good question.
I'm actually not
Okay.
Because I think that's the misunderstanding is,
yes,
you can be in a crowded room, right? And feel incredibly lonely.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think this is what I hope we get into, because I do hear this often. I don't know why I'm lonely. I'm with people all the time.
Yeah.
And so what I've been learning on my own journey, especially in the last 5 to 10 years, is, and when we talk about emotional intelligence, one of the skills of emotional intelligence and the 5 realms of emotional intelligence is emotional self-awareness and emotional self-expression. And my ability to tell the truth, express the truth about me to a trustworthy person, and hear the truth creates that type of connection. So like when I'm with you guys, there's a level of freedom that I have, that I know that I can express myself more fully and consistently and even clumsily, and that be okay, which creates a sense of security, that I think that is really because the gift, right? The gift of expression and connection is intimacy, that richness or the vibrancy of that connection. So yeah, man, I spent so many years being an exhausted extrovert, because it's like I was on this treadmill relationally. I had all the energy to be with the people, but I wasn't really experiencing the nourishment of what that was like. So it's like chewing your food and spitting it out almost, and not ingesting it. I just made that up, but I think it fits.
Another bumper sticker.
Yeah.
That's really what this is all about. We're just creating bumper stickers. How about you, Jason? Where do you fit in that continuum in terms of people energy? How would you describe your experience?
Yeah, I feel like I'm right on the line. I love being with people, but I get tired when I'm with people. And so I need time alone to recharge and to replenish. And I work with a number of teenagers, and it's tough because on the one hand, like different parents have different, I guess, rules or boundaries when it comes to social media, for example. And I had a client who was going through a really difficult time, and he was very isolated because of what he'd been through. He was used to presenting himself as fun and strong and a performer, and people liked him. He'd get laughs. But then he started suffering with pretty intense anxiety, and he didn't feel like he could express that. because their whole social connectedness, or at least social participation, was about strength, and what you could bring to the group in terms of, like I said, the laughs and getting people to you're a good time, if I could say it that way.
Entertaining them. Yeah.
Entertaining. But then he started suffering with pretty intense anxiety that led to depression. And so he started isolating because he thought his friends expected him to be a certain way.
Yeah.
And he wasn't that way now. And so where social media comes in is he started going on Instagram and seeing all the stuff that his friends were posting, and it just caused his loneliness to increase intensely because he was assuming that he was alone in his suffering.
Yeah.
And so on the one hand, social media can connect us, right? There's teenagers who their parents are more like strict in regards to what kind of apps they can be on. And they really feel left out because a lot of the communication that's happening, it's like, hey, let's go do this. And they're communicating through Snapchat and Instagram and stuff like that, TikTok. So there isn't a loneliness if they're not participating, but the obsessive use of it can really, especially if someone is anxious and feeling depressed, it really drives that sense of like, okay, they all have it together. They're not feeling anxious. They're not feeling depressed. I am weird. I am uniquely suffering. And this is what social media does, is we kind of tell our own story about what's happening with the videos that our friends post or the things that they say. It's like, oh my gosh, they are doing the thing that I used to do, and they're doing it so much better. And here I am, and we just isolate. That line is like, how do we use social media in a way that helps us stay connected instead of disconnects us?
Tim, let's go back a little bit to two big topics here in terms of, because I'm curious what the report says about the use of social media and its impact. I also want to hear you guys talk about how you describe loneliness, so like, how are we identifying whether or not we are experiencing loneliness, and how do people put their finger on that? Because I don't know that that's common vernacular necessarily, or we don't know what to do with it. But yeah, so maybe we'll kick around those two items of, what's the report telling us as it pertains to that social media, and how are we defining and describing what loneliness is?
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually don't remember what the report had said exactly. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But I do
put you on the spot.
Yeah, it's okay. I do know what Dr. Murphy has said about social media and young people, and that's he has reported that there is not enough research in answer to the question that he gets all the time. He says the number one question he gets from parents about social media: is social media safe for children or young people to use, their children to use? And his response is, we don't have enough research to answer that question. So, and there's not enough evidence to say that it is safe. And then he goes on to talk about the negative impact that it appears to be having on young people. And a lot of those things are exactly what Jason was just describing. He just really spelled it out really well. But as you heard from Jason, it was like, and there's a downside. Like if they're not on it, it also produces its own sense of inadequacy and loneliness because of the stories that the kids create or tell in their heads. So there's not an easy fix to just say, well, then I won't be on social media because it's dangerous. So I'm not going to pretend that I know the answer to that question. But I know that Dr. Murphy believes at this point that it has a lot of dangers that go along with it. And truthfully, I don't know very many adults who know how to handle social media.
Right.
And that's why I hear pretty regularly when I talk to adults about social media, a lot of them, not a lot, enough, are saying, I can't handle it. So I don't have it. I've deleted the apps. I'm not doing it. I'm one of those. I don't do it. I think that if it is that hard for adults to handle in a healthy way, why do we think that teenagers and preteens should be able to handle social media in a healthy way? The second question.
Go ahead. Yeah, no, it's great. Yeah, I was just going to add, like, when you also know when you try to take that away or to create boundaries around it from teens, we learn a lot from our reactions to that of like, that's a really strong reaction to the removal of a particular thing. I wonder what that could mean. So it's like, yeah, and I'm speaking for myself and others in the age and stage of life with teenagers of like, wow, there seems to be a name for that when I can't cease the use of something without having an explosive reaction. So anyway, it's definitely.
We have a story in our family of my son. He's now 40 years old and very mature and socially competent and all. But when he was young, he wanted a Game Boy, and we wouldn't let him have one. And the reason,
the beginning of the end,
yes, because whenever he did play any sort of video game, he would get so angry when he lost, and he would just lose it. And so it was that experience that caused us to decide, no, we're not getting you a game. But when my daughter, who was 10 years younger, when she got to a certain age of getting a video game like that, we gave her one because frankly, she lost a game. She didn't perform as well as she could. She just didn't care. She just put it down and walk away. And boy, he was upset about that, of course, as he got older. You never gave me a Game Boy. But you're right. That reaction is very telling, telling in terms of the addictive nature of a substance or an action.
And I know I want to give this back to the loneliness thing, but 2 follow-up questions to that. Number 1, is 40 kind of the age, the threshold of how old your kids have to be before you can start publicly telling stories? Is that the appropriate? Because I need to apply that. I need to be careful. And number 2, when you were talking about, because we've had the same experience with our kids as it pertains to phones and social media. A couple of my kids who were not nearly as drawn into it. They could take it or leave it. It just did not seem to matter as much to them. And so, unfortunately, that informed some of my parenting, thinking, well, it just doesn't affect my kids the same way. And then you realize, no, it just didn't affect that kid the same way. So you really are paying attention to and different traits and our different manners of being. So that's a really interesting component because, we're likely not going to be able to be just equitable in our treatment of that. And it's the same across the board. But anyway, that interesting point.
That would be another podcast.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Sounds like it.
Well, I think,
go ahead.
During the pandemic, right, especially in the early days, like technology, social media, I feel like that helped us connect because we didn't have the capacity, and in large part, right, to be with people physically. And so it served us well. I'm speaking from my experience, but just what it was like to be on a Zoom meeting. It was weird, but it was like, hey, I get to see your face, not in person. I get to talk to you. We can have a conversation. My family, like extended family, even did a game night over Zoom.
Yes.
And it was kind of weird, but at the same time, it was like, okay, we get to have some fun together and be together in a sense. Now, the problem with technology and social media is we just don't use it very wisely, and we use it to really take the place of. So instead of serving us in our pursuit to connect and to be in community, it gets in the way. And that's where we come back to like, what is a wise, healthy use of technology and social media? Am I using it to, does it serve me in connecting with others, or has it become a way for me to avoid connecting? And
yeah,
what
I think that might be a
like?
good way of, a good way of framing the question is it moving me toward intimacy or isolation, if I could maybe frame it that way? And how can I tell the difference? How do I discern the difference?
I think it's so wise, Jason, what you just said. We wouldn't be having this conversation right now. We wouldn't be able to accomplish what we're doing right now if it weren't for the technology that advanced through the COVID time. I think it is a very helpful tool. And you're right. A lot of the things we were able to do because actually of COVID, the pandemic, are really have become a blessing and not just a curse, if you will. And that puts a lot of responsibility on parents who are to be guiding these children, or the caregivers who are to be guiding these children in the use of those tools.
Yeah, there's a quote, Sherry Turkle. I listened to a podcast she did a number of years ago, and this was before COVID, but she was sounding the alarm on this misuse of technology and social media. She has a doctorate and a professor somewhere, but she has this quote: "If we don't know how to be alone, we'll always know how to be lonely." And I think about times in my life, but also some of my clients in therapy sessions where they are feeling alone. And that's such a painful experience. They'll hop on social media, right? Yes. With their phones. And I'm not joking. They will scroll for 2-3 hours, just mind-numbingly scrolling.
Yes.
And because they don't know how to be alone.
Yes.
And that is, I mean, we could go all kinds of directions with that, but just the sense of the human condition, part of being human are times of being alone. And it gives us an opportunity to really name those painful emotions that we're feeling, sadness, fear, shame, and to be aware of those emotional experiences, to reflect on why we're feeling them and the meaning of them. And from that place, make real connection with people, whether that's picking up the phone to call someone or even using social media to connect with someone, but not as a way to avoid, but to really connect. And that could look like texting a friend and just saying, "Hey, like, I am feeling very alone right now. I am really struggling right now." But what often happens is with social media and technologies, we don't know how to be alone. So we only know how to be lonely. And we will go on social media and the comparison game starts. Their life's better than mine. They have it all together. They're not struggling like I do. So that comparison in that way, but also the comparison like, I'm so much better than them. Oh my gosh, like what a loser they are. And it just feeds that shame. Like we're comparing ourselves to someone else. We either come out on top or on the bottom. And it's amazing how addictive that dynamic can be on social media, because we're not really seeing real life, right? We're seeing some projection of like who people want us to see and the story, just fill in the gaps of all that. Go ahead, Shad.
No. What was coming to mind and is the distinction between living out of my own purpose, so it's like, am I living out of this sense of purpose, of the meaning that I want to create, the values that I want to bring and contribute to the world? Or am I kind of escaping from those and playing more of this observational role of just observing what everyone else is doing? And so really guiding that, animating my life around what am I pursuing and moving toward, versus what am I avoiding? Because that's a courageous, scary way to live, right? Of what am I putting out of myself into the world? Not just on social media, just in terms of what am I showing up with and contributing and laboring for and risking and sacrificing for, versus kind of the feeling of doing something and not actually doing anything. I love I think there's more for you to say around not knowing, only knowing how to be lonely, not knowing how to be alone. I think you guys are going to have to parse that out a little bit more.
Well, feeling alone is not the problem. That's being human. There's going to be many times where we're going to feel alone. It's what we do with it. Right.
And what is that inviting us into? What is that feeling of?
Well, yeah, it invites us into intimacy and connection and relationship that will help us feel less alone. I have a story from my life where I was going through a very difficult time. I'd heard some news that was very produced a lot of shame and anxiety in me. And initially, I hopped on my phone and started scrolling to see what this person that I'd heard the news about was doing. And I was feeling just so much shame over it. And I decided to stop, and I called a friend. Technology, I was still using my phone, but I called a friend and I just said, and this was a new response for me. This was not something I usually would do. But all I brought to this conversation, now this was a trusted friend that I'd built a relationship, and I trusted that he was safe and would have empathy towards me. I just shared all what I thought were crazy thoughts, and just how much that I was struggling and how afraid I was. And I used technology in that moment not to double down on my loneliness or to isolate myself, but to take the risk of being connected. And it was a risk because there was this fear in my mind. If I talk to my friend right now, he's going to think I'm making too big a deal of this. He's going to try to talk me out of it, or, and then I would feel even worse. And that's really why we don't bring our lonely selves to relationships. It's because the risk is they're going to reject me and I'm going to feel even worse. And we can then, because that risk is so great, we can then hide on our phones and use technology to really work against us, isolate ourselves even more.
Tim, I love that. Tim, I'm also wondering if part of why we avoid our loneliness or escape it is because we don't really know what intimacy feels like. Yeah. Like in the absence of experiencing that rich, intimate connection, we don't know what to do in our lonely. So we're trying to minimize it and medicate it and manage it because we have so little intimacy.
Yeah. I think that's true. I take it a step further and say, we don't even know that we are lonely much of the time. We don't know what it is. We just know it's pain. And we know we're vulnerable. And we don't know even if we do know that we're lonely, we don't know what we're lonely for. It's just too scary to even contemplate that, which is why we pick up that phone. It's too scary to sit in that. So it's why we pick up the phone and start scrolling through Instagram or Facebook or whatever, and to just block it out, to just push it down, to hold it down. And so if we were ever able to identify it as loneliness, then we could ask, what are we lonely for, or who are we lonely for? And we can be lonely for three people. We can be lonely for God, for our Creator. We can be lonely for others. I realize that's not a person, for someone else, or for others, just people. And we can be lonely for ourselves. And I think this is beautiful, what you're saying, Jason. I think this coincides perfectly with our ability to be alone. And when we are able to be alone with ourselves, that's a loneliness for self. So it's a loneliness for solitude, a loneliness to just be, not isolated, but solitude. And sometimes that's very scary for many of us. In fact, if you were just talking to one of our other therapists the other day who's been on at least 2, I think he said 4 or 5 days silent retreats. He said the first one was really rough. If you've ever been on a silent retreat, he said, my goodness, try not talking for 4 days to anyone.
Wow.
You talk about that'll build your loneliness muscle, your solitude muscle. Anyway, so a lot of people don't even know it, and this is where I think it's a developmental skill. It's something we need to learn to exercise, and by that I'm talking about the heart muscle, learning to identify when we're feeling lonely, and then like you did, which is beautiful. That's a great story, Jason. Step into it instead of away from it. Embrace it instead of away from it. Take the risk that friend isn't going to reject you for it. I know that I lived most of my early life alone. Not alone, but lonely. I lived about a year of my senior year in high school. I lived alone, and I had no idea I was lonely. It never occurred to me that I was lonely just because I was alone. I was 17 years old, and I went home every day after high school, got up every morning, took myself to school. It never occurred to me that I was lonely. That just wasn't part of my vocabulary or part of my everyday experience. But that just set me up to be lonely as I moved forward throughout my life in many ways. So it's risky, though, to say I'm lonely because we feel vulnerable. Someone's going to, like you said, reject us, abandon us, think we're weak. And that's certainly for men. And nobody wants to be thought of as being weak.
Yeah.
And the beauty of it, Shad, back to your original question, is that brings intimacy.
Right.
That is when we have the opportunity, at least, the greatest opportunity available to us for someone to see us. And then we experience being seen, and not only seen, but loved and accepted. Mm-hmm. And that there's no better experience in the world. I mean, you could name anything that comes to mind as a pleasurable, euphoric experience. And this is better than that. This is close to heaven as we get. Being seen, being loved and accepted for who we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to your point at the beginning is that we don't have to have 52 people that we have that level of connect. Even extroverts, especially, I don't need 25 people to know everything about me. Now, I may have a lot of energy to share and willingness to share and experience that with other people, but it doesn't need to be. It's not about multitude. It's about consistency and depth. And your point about loneliness being, because when people will say, like when I'm coaching clients and we talk about loneliness, I will push them to be specific about who they are lonely for.
Yeah.
Because if you say I'm generally lonely, that's a pretty big problem to solve versus saying I'm lonely for Tim or I'm lonely for Jason. Basically what you're saying is I miss you. I miss them. Well, that's an invitation to say, well, reach out to Jason, reach out to Tim, see how they are, see where they are. Or knowing that there are people that I can turn to when I am feeling a great degree of pain and I'm feeling alone in my pain, knowing that just the knowledge that I've got people I can reach out to is incredibly comforting, even if I'm not able to in that moment or at that time. So I think it's like this self-fulfilling prophecy, or kind of this loop we get stuck in of I'm alone. There's nobody to reach out to in my loneliness. I'll always be alone, and it'll always be this painful. And I never experienced the intimacy that's possible. And so part of this is being people that can offer that to someone. Like, can I be a person that can offer intimacy to someone else, and who can offer that to me? And really, it's like we have to relearn how to do that because we're so bad at it in general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Brene Brown, she's a professor and on kind of a expert of sorts on shame and vulnerability. And her first book was called I Thought It Was Just Me.
Mm-hmm.
And, he talked about in the Surgeon General's report about the epidemic of loneliness and how that's led to all these health issues. Isn't one of the things like loneliness is like smoking 15 cigarettes a day or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
It's just like,
yeah, the health impact of obesity and smoking.
Yeah.
15 cigarettes. Yeah.
Just think if you had this belief, like a daily experience of I thought it was just me, or it's just me.
Yeah.
I'm the only one I'm uniquely dysfunctional. I'm uniquely broken. And if that's the case, then gosh, I gotta hide that. I can't tell anybody that.
Right.
And what happens though is when someone takes that risk of vulnerability and shares their story about how they're struggling, the idea is, oh, I thought it was just me. Right. I guess it's not. Other people are like me in that way, and that can bring that connectedness, but it takes courage to do that. But
yeah, very risky.
Yeah.
One of the ways I have, and y'all can correct me on this. I don't know where I heard this or if this was a rare original thought. I'm going to assume that I heard this somewhere else. But one of the ways that I've come to identify loneliness is boredom.
Yeah.
So, and what I've realized, and I've had this conversation with my kids as well, with varying degrees of receptivity, of like, you're not bored, you're lonely. Like it's not a lack of something to do. It's a lack of connection with myself or with God or with someone else.
Yes.
And so I think another way for us to identify that, whether we're longing for some connection, is when what we've come to call boredom. But I kind of am going like, I don't think boredom is a real thing personally. And I don't think I haven't said that publicly really, because I'm not 100% confident in it. But when I have kind of self-diagnosed that and said and felt this sense of boredom or this inner angst or this temptation to reach for something to snack on or scroll through or drink, it's generally of like, I'm really feeling a longing or a craving for some other relational connection, but that just has not been the natural way that I've gone about satisfying that craving. It's generally finding something else to pacify it. So I'd love to hear y'all's professional assessment of that, as long as you agree with me.
Well, I'm growing to believe it more the more I live, the longer I live, because we were made for relationship. That's just part of our DNA. It's our spiritual DNA, our physical, emotional DNA, to be in relationship all the time. And that either means you with God, or you with somebody else. And you're always with you, and you're always with God. You're not always with somebody else. And the thing that produces that boredom would be a disconnect from one of those people. It just makes perfect sense, and it's been my real experience.
I know boredom is painful. I know it's something we avoid. We don't like it. And so, yeah, when we feel bored, it's like, man, I got to do something.
Yeah, it's almost like it feels anxious in me, and anxiety I always kind of know just craves relief. So it's like, how do I relieve this sense of anxiety? And am I going, we haven't necessarily parsed this, but, am I going to use something to bring me relief? Or will I find something that will serve me, like serve me well, benefit or nourish me? And I think that's another real kind of nuanced or way of discerning Like, am I using social media as a means of, relieving whatever I'm experiencing? Or is it serving me to bring me into a space and place of intimacy? Maybe another way of kind of assessing or diagnosing what we're doing, so we're not on autopilot.
And also, it fits with our mistaken belief that our whole culture, and I say our culture, I mean humankind, that we are supposed to be productive. We're supposed to be doing something. And as we like to say around here, that we are not human doings, we're human beings. And so relationship, though, isn't about doing.
Mm-hmm.
Relationship is about being. And I love this quote from this book, and also now it's a movie, short animated film called, I'll probably mess this up, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. You guys know this?
Or yes, you could have said it. You could have said any animal combination.
I didn't. I knew there was a horse, a mole, and a boy. I would have forgotten the fox.
Okay. Anyway, in it, at one point, all four of them are together, and they're just like making snow angels or whatever a horse makes when they play in the snow, playing around in the snow, if you will. They're just playing around. They're just wasting time.
Mm-hmm.
The boy says, you're never wasting time when you're with your friends. Isn't that beautiful? It's just a simple statement. You're never wasting time when you're with your friends. See, if you're connecting with people, you're just being.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And it's also like the experiences we have that we really enjoy are those times when you're with friends and that time goes by so fast. Like, it's easy. It just kind of like, it's never enough. You're like, I want more. That's another really good, those experiences that are so precious of that sense where it's not laborious, where you're just able to be. And it's like that. It's almost like being in some kind of time warp where it goes by really quick, but it's really full. So, really good. So, a conversation I hope we get to continue, because there's obviously one of those topics you never get to the bottom of. We're always, because we are made so relational, it is our responsibility to be good at, like to grow in our ability to connect with other people. And so that's something that we will continually be learning. I want to age gracefully. I don't want to get more rigid and fragile as I get older, where I'm not able to grow and connect and relate to people throughout the course of my days, which is, far too often kind of a caricature of older age as being more brittle and less relationally available, emotionally available. So something we never outgrow, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. But Jason, Tim, thank you all for taking the time to interact a little bit around this subject matter, and I hope we get the chance to do it again soon.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks,